Hey everyone, I'm Brandin Tyrrel. I reviewed The Order 1886. We're going to discuss our thoughts on it today, but first I'm joined by Miranda Sanchez.
Hello.
And John Ryan.
Hi there.
So I've got a lot to talk about. I want to jump right in, but first let's take a look at the verdict.
The basic conflict at the heart of The Order 1886 is that considerations for a cinematic approach are prioritized above the needs of basic gameplay. The Order's best parts are contained within its stunning looks, its atmosphere, its style, which are truly fantastic. But the shallow, slow, generic, quick-time event-riddled gameplay make it feel like an experience that would have been better served by a non-interactive movie than a game. With no multiplayer, and no reason to revisit the short and stunted single-player campaign, there just isn't a lot to it. For more on The Order 1886, stick with IGN.
So the first thing I want to talk about is length. It's been kind of a big topic over the week.
Yep.
And Marty, Max, Jared, and Brian did a great bit on Podcast Beyond about length. Does it matter? Why we like it? Why we don't like it? So, we've already talked that into the ground. So let's focus instead on
Everybody has.
Yeah, let's focus instead on the length of The Order 1886 in the context of The Order 1886.
Cool.
So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I think personally, like the overall length, I thought it was sufficient. I just feel like the amount of time you spend either watching cutscenes or just like kind of slowly walking around hallways and passages, like the length of the game didn't bother me. It's how that time was used,
Right.
you know?
Right. I felt like in the beginning there's some severe pacing issues.
Mm-hmm.
I was really confused about certain factions that are mentioned during the entire game, and then you kind of stumble upon what they are, but it's never really clear, and they should have taken more time to actually go into detail about that.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the lore and the setup that they had, but focusing on the pacing of it, I thought that they did a particularly strange job of sort of dumping you into it. On one hand, I can understand because it's sort of up to you to figure it out, and then on the other hand, it's you spend so much time sort of building, and then you are thrown into cutscenes and then into gameplay, and then there's a huge period where it's just nothing but exposition, and then there's a huge chunk of nothing but gameplay. And
And through a lot of those cutscenes, I just sat there waiting. It's like, am I going to get a quick time event soon?
Yeah.
Do I have to be ready?
I kept thinking, like, can I set my controller down and get a drink, or do I need to hit R2 for any reason?
Exactly. It's like, is this going to be like, Guns of the Patriots, where I can just be like, I'm just going to leave the room and go to the fridge, get a beer, come back, and it'll still be going. But I feel like also when you have those like huge chunks of gameplay and those huge chunks of cutscenes, they don't play off each other as well as you hope. Like in some cases they do, like where you have like a little bit of gameplay, a little cutscene, a little bit of gameplay, a little cutscene.
Right.
Those are the moments where it works at its best.
Perfectly, sure.
Where it's that really cool, and they showed this off a whole lot when they were promoting the game, where it's like where they show off like seamless transitions between cutscene and gameplay. I thought that aspect of it was great. But then you'll go for 2-3 chapters at a time, and it's just a cutscene, and then you're like, okay, well, I guess this is fine. But then there's that one quick time event in the whole thing. And you're like, well,
then you
why?
miss it, and then you're just like, oh.
And then it starts over, and it's unskippable.
You can't skip. So
and
you're stuck.
your gameplay length might be about 10 hours, but it's just because you ended up having to go back and watch cutscenes again.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say though that there are times where there are quick time events where if you fail, you get a cool little cinematic cutscene.
Oh yeah.
Well, no spoilers. I don't want to give anything away, but so there are times where I deliberately just like failed to watch someone get mauled to death, or to see someone do something differently. But I think you're right. Those pacing issues are a huge chunk of it. So, I mean, all that said, the full length of the game, right?
Yeah.
With those pacing issues, did you feel like it was better served by a shorter experience, or did you feel like you could have gone another 6 hours?
I feel like if they would have repurposed their time a little better, then it would have been fine as is.
Yeah.
They tell their story, it's good as it is, but you just need to figure out what's important and what's not. Walking through a hallway, just walking, you can't run, you can't do anything.
Right.
That is a waste of time.
Yeah.
I get that your game is beautiful, and it's so gorgeous, but I don't want to walk.
I don't need to walk around for 20 to 30 seconds, or even up to like 3 or 4 minutes, just to see like one piece of lighting reflect some rain particles. It's like, it looks cool, it's awesome, but you can also just do that in a cutscene because it's all this in-game engine.
Yeah. So I said in my review that I spent 7 hours in the Order, and I felt like, strangely enough, that was actually a little on the long side for what I played. I really dig the world.
Yep.
I dig the characters and everything about it. But it's just that pacing was so off-putting that by the end I was just like, oh, I kept tapping the
Yeah.
D-pad to see if I could pull out my gun.
Yeah.
And to see if I was like, all right, am I going to be doing anything in the next 10 minutes? No?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to
Well, and the thing too is like, you know, I mean, this kind of jumps into the story a little bit, but like where you're going to spend so much of that time listening to characters talk about like the politics of the order and like
Yeah,
how it
there's a lot
works
of
and stuff.
bureaucracy.
And it's like
Yeah.
part of that honestly is interesting to me.
Sure.
But add an extra half hour of gameplay on top of that where like you're actually like give me a puzzle to solve about bureaucracy or something, you know.
Right.
Don't just have me sitting listening to an old man talk about tradition and the order and like why it's important for England and all that. It's like
Right. I think that's a big problem throughout the entire game is that they don't let you be involved. It's just like they want to drag you through the story. So that's a big thing with the pacing is
Yeah.
that you'll jump from cutscene to gameplay to cutscene to gameplay, or you'll be cutscene, a little bit of walking, another cutscene.
Yeah.
Then you can just walk a little more, then cutscene.
Yeah.
It's like they're dragging you through this, and
Yeah.
that you don't have any control over what you're doing.
It's not so much guiding you as it is grabbing you by the wrist.
yeah, it's
and
really
pulling you through.
Yeah, it's kicking you down the hallway.
Cool.
And it's
Well-
like if you want to make a movie, make a movie.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. Like I'll watch it. I love the world that they've set up. But if
It is
you-
great. It is
if
a
you
great
want to, you know, force me to do it in this fashion, or you're gonna make me spend this much time, just like make it a miniseries on
Sure.
Netflix or something.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to talk about the world, the characters, the lore. Let's stay away from as much of the story as possible.
Okay.
It's one of the high beats, in my opinion. But I'm really curious. What was your guys' take on the world that they put together for the Order?
I loved it.
It was definitely, as far as interactivity goes, a look, don't touch
Sure.
world.
Museum rules apply.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, like it was kind of disheartening to not be able to explore it because they created such a cool
It is
universe.
so good.
So interesting too.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the time period they chose and
Well, that's the thing is, I usually like if I see someone being like, "It's steampunk influence," I'm like, "Nope, get it away from me!
Yeah,
Burn it, set
yeah.
it on fire!
But,
I hate
but
it."
that's the thing is like I didn't actually notice it being too steampunkish. It
and
feels,
that's what I'm saying. It's like this is like if this was what people thought of when they think of
Instead of
steampunk, and
big
not some
cogs
like
and brass
douche
helmets
in like a
and-
top
Yeah.
hat covered in cogs and gears, I'd be like, "This is totally fine," because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like futuristic technologies for the time period.
Yeah.
That still feel age appropriate.
Sure.
you
So
know?
that's one thing I loved is how they were like, all right, we need the electricity gun, right?
Yeah.
We need the thermite rifle, which is awesome.
yeah, yeah. The
Best.
tech in it was
The
so
best.
cool.
It's so good. And at the same time, they're like, how can we ground this in realism or
Right.
historical
Yeah. It's like,
nonfiction?
oh, we'll
Even
have
if-
Nikola Tesla show up, and like, guess what?
Exactly.
He makes all your guns.
And
you're
he is
like, cool.
he is very much like the Nostradamus from Assassin's Creed 2. He's like
Yeah.
he's like your historical figure who's like, oh, by the way, he's also the gadget guy. He's
Yeah.
Q for the Order.
Exactly. He's Da Vinci.
Yeah, and I love the way that they pulled all that in. You're right, Da Vinci, not Nostradamus. I love the way they pulled all that in. They had these little threads of history, and they were like, well, what if this actually happened?
Yeah.
And they used all those threads to like weave this really impressive atmospheric world.
Yeah, and it's cool too. Like when you finally get into it, like once you get past the first chapter or two,
Yeah.
and they introduce the fact that the Order is like the past now modern day reincarnation of Arthur's Knights of the Round
Oh,
Table.
that was so good.
Like
Right.
it was
love that.
like it's not a huge spoilery thing because like we all kind of figured it.
That's very early in the story.
But it's really cool to see. But then you get the whole stuff with like the Blackwater and the Blacklight, where it's like there's that one dude who's just like, I think he's been around, like he fought with King Arthur, and they're like,
Yeah.
wait,
yeah, you're
what?
like, wait, King Arthur?
Yeah,
How could that
exactly.
happen? And then you find out later that this Blackwater's keeping him alive.
Right, and
essentially forever.
I want to see more of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I loved, right? Because in the old Knights of the Round Table or King Arthur tales, it's like they looked for the Holy Grail,
Right.
supposed to grant eternal youth.
Yep.
And they, in this world, they found it, and that's awesome,
Yeah.
right? And they've taken that myth and applied it practically to this gameplay mechanic, which I think is actually really interesting, right? A lot of the gameplay mechanics they chose are backed up in the lore and the history,
Yeah.
and I'm stoked about that. I wish a lot more developers did that.
Yep.
And I love the way they pulled historical fiction, historical nonfiction, myth, legend, and
Right.
werewolves, and
Well,
they,
that's the
they
thing.
weaved it all together.
Yeah, it's like I would love, I've said this to a bunch of people that I would like to see this like as like a web series or like
Yeah.
a Netflix thing.
Yeah.
Like the universe itself is so good, but they were so focused on being like, this is the world we've created, this is the story we're going to tell. here is the only way that you're allowed to experience it. And like,
Right.
you know, they put you into these huge stately buildings and like let you loose in London, but you
Yeah.
aren't really let loose. You
Exactly.
like, you can walk down this one alleyway. You can
Yeah.
go into this one building and there's like a closet you can explore, but you don't have freedom to go and explore the rest of the world.
So that's what Miranda was saying, right?
Right.
Like,
So earlier, you can look at everything, but you can't touch much. Like
Right.
even with like the collectibles, which really aren't. There's
Yeah.
only one thing you
God.
can collect in there, which is like the phonographs.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you just pick them up. You can listen to them in this like super old English that's really difficult to listen to if you're walking around.
Sure.
So you have to go into the menu and like read along with it. And there's some interesting things.
Yeah, like one of them was a lullaby, and it was very pretty. And,
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Then you get the ones that are like, you know, because it's happening in London around the time of like when Jack the Ripper was a thing and like
Sure.
all those crimes, those murders. And so like you'll pick up a newspaper and there'll be like 6 full page articles.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I want to take the time to go and read all of those.
Right.
Yeah.
And have them another option to read them. So whenever you pick up a newspaper, you just look at it.
Oh
And
my
some
God,
text
right.
is kind of chopped off. You
Exactly.
can't see everything.
Like-
Absolutely,
I'm
like-
I just want to read this.
yeah, there's a setting in the options menu to like listen to the phonographs. Why isn't there a setting to like read the newspapers? Right.
Yeah.
Right, or
So
like-
like just get like text copy in a bonus menu somewhere.
Because
Sure.
you're right, the headlines add amazing context, and I actually part of the reason why it took me 7 hours, right, is because I stopped to smell the roses and
Right.
read
As
like-
much as you can.
Yeah, and read a couple paragraphs. Like I'm not going to read the whole. Like, I read a couple.
Oh no,
paragraphs.
you'll read that whole thing. You'll sit down with a cup of coffee and be like,
Yeah.
all right, what am
It's
I
like,
going to learn
alright,
today?
time to-
They are
Yeah.
loaded with text. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I want to read those, and I
Yeah.
don't. If I set it down, I can't go back. Like I have to reload the chapter. And I have to
Exactly.
go back and find it again.
Yeah.
Right. And in addition to that, the objects you interact with, it's just you pick them up and you just turn them around.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
It's so awkward.
this game
Yeah.
is so in love with its own object models. Like
Yep.
it's the
I
gun.
mean, it
this.
looks great. Like visually, they've built an astounding game. Like
Sure.
it looks amazing,
Right.
but at the same time, it's just like you see these beautiful visuals and you see the physics engine works really well, but you're so angry because you can't do anything with it.
Right.
Right.
Like
It's
there's
like, I
that.
can't keep it. I can't do anything with
Yeah,
these
there's
things.
that one great bit where you get to like pick up an apple and throw it at some dude, and you're like, I want to do that all the time.
Yeah,
Like,
like-
every
Right.
time I see fruit, just let me huck it around.
This is a third-person shooter. Like at least let me aim it. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's just so many missed opportunities what they could have done with their
Sure.
items.
Yeah.
But I don't. It's kind of cool. Yeah, you do get a feel for the world and like kind of look at this item that's relevant to this place.
Yep.
But it doesn't go anywhere past that. And even then, like each chapter that has items, they're like so limited.
Yeah.
So if you're like searching corners and stuff, you're not rewarded for that. Like I went into these closets, like look, a separate path. Maybe there's something here. Nope, just
Sorry.
on
Yeah.
Yeah.
the engine room or something.
Yeah. I would love
Boring.
to see more of the backstory and the lore, though.
Yeah.
You know?
And I would love to be able to interact with it in a way that isn't
Yeah.
just slowly walking through a hallway
Yeah.
and
Right.
taking in the sights and the sounds.
Yep.
You know. So let's talk about the shooting.
Yep.
It is, as I said in the review, very third-person cover-based shooting.
Yep.
Yep.
They don't do anything fancy, and they don't elevate it beyond anything other than this is cover-based shooting. So that's my opinion. What did you guys think of it?
Very heavy on the waves. It's signaled whenever you're about to approach any enemy at all because unless you're in a combat zone, you can't pull out your weapon.
Yeah, no,
So-
that infuriated me because it was
Yep.
sort of like a spoiler, like, hey, you're not going to fight anything for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
then your
it's
gun
You
pulls
can't
out.
even bring up the menu that shows you your weapon.
Exactly,
Like,
and then your gun instantly pulls out, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I need to shoot a guy.
bad guys are
Yeah,
here.
so it's this weird signal. It's like, okay, I'm safe. I don't care what's happening because I'll be fine.
So it
Yeah.
pulls you out, right?
There was,
Right.
yeah, there was
tension.
never really that kind of like, there might be werewolves or bad dudes here. What am
Right.
I gonna
And
do?
there's some very eerie scenes and
Yeah.
Yeah.
like awkward places to be. It's like, man, I'm very uncomfortable, but my gun's not out, so I'm fine.
Right,
Yeah,
like there's
exactly.
an early on moment. It's like in the second or third chapter where you end up in like an abandoned hospital.
Sure.
And I mean, it's like you go in
It's-
and you're like, there is, 18th century medicine is terrifying on its own. But
Exactly,
then you
yeah.
see like a hospital that's been ravaged by like basically civil war, and you're like, oh, this is really awful, but I'm fine.
But my gun's not out, so
Right.
I'm okay. Yeah, there was one moment where like you heard somebody from behind a door. I think it was a sanitarium or like an old mental
Yeah, yeah.
hospital.
Right.
And I
Down in the basement.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you pull the thing, there's a dude in
so
there.
I open the thing and I see a guy sitting in the corner, just like banging his head against the
Yeah, I
wall.
was
Yep.
so scared to
And
close
I'm
it.
thinking
I was
like,
no.
nope, here
Nope,
it
no,
comes,
thank you.
here it comes. And then I was like, oh,
And
but
then
my
nothing
gun's
ever
not
came of
out.
it.
So
And then you just turn around, everything's fine.
yeah,
It's peachy.
and then you continue to
Whatever.
walk and
Yep.
quick time event,
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that I will say about the combat, it's sort of related to the combat, is that I really enjoyed the arsenal, the guns.
Yeah.
To a degree, I did as well.
Yeah.
There were some that some pistols I was like, just get out of my sight.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't
the
want
little,
to see.
what is it, the 6-shooter, like the little Smith & Wesson one, not like the big Magnum, but like the little
Right.
regular
Yeah.
6-shooter. It's like that, never ever pick those up. I hate you.
Yeah.
Every time I see you, I just get angry because you're not ammo for the gun that I have.
It does
Right.
feel like a pea shooter. It's just like tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
But like when I say the guns, I mean more like the impressive support. There are some very generic,
Like the arc
pistol
cannon
1,
and-
pistol 2, pistol 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
I
yeah,
like the double shot revolver. Like it's
That's
almost
cool.
like a blunderbuss. I thought that was super.
the boom
A
boom.
duelist
Yeah,
thing?
Yeah.
the boom boom.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then there's the Dragon Magnum revolver.
Oh yeah, that
you
one's
were talking
awesome.
about.
That
The
was
really
so
loud one?
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that thing
It feels
just
a lot more powerful.
it
that
is.
makes sense.
Yeah, it
because-
tears people apart.
Yeah.
But no, like the Tesla weapons.
Sure.
are
So the
like-
art gun, the thermite rifle.
Mhm.
So what's your opinion on the thermite rifle?
I'm not a fan, to
You-
be
you
honest.
don't like the thermite
no,
So
no, no, no,
I
no.
get why you don't like it,
When
but
it-
it's so good.
No, look, when it first shows up, when they're first like thermite rifle, and you're like, what?
yeah. I'm shooting
And
clouds
like blow
of
up a building.
combustible
You're like,
metal.
yes, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But then when you use it more and like you get it into a space that isn't like a small room or
Sure.
like where your enemy types are not like stacked 2 or 3 on
Right,
top of one
exactly.
another.
Right.
As soon as you're in like a wider space, it's completely useless.
Well, yeah, I did feel like it was a huge waste of resources when
Yeah.
I was like, I have to paint you in a cloud of
dust,
and then I have to shoot this flare at you. That's like a lot of resources for one
Right.
guy, and it's slow, but it's so satisfying.
It's fun, but yeah, the range
It's
is definitely
satisfying
an
when
issue.
it works.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
when you light up like 3 or 4 dudes in one cloud and they're like, "Wah!" You feel kind of bad, but then you're like, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Arc rifle is awesome though.
Arc rifle's
I thought
great.
the arc cannon was so good.
Yeah.
There's a couple more of them. The like sticky grenade launcher, I thought was.
I don't even remember. Like I remember it, but I don't even remember
The
using it.
detonator?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Well,
now.
it was weird because it was just like I kind of just want to shoot grenades because like there was never a time when I felt like I needed to trigger the detonation
Yeah.
myself. Like I could have just shot it and it could have exploded where it landed. And it
Yeah,
would've
the
been fine.
remote function of it was super lost.
Well,
on
because
me.
the AI, I mean, those guys don't move.
yeah,
That's true.
There are moments where I felt challenged by the combat, but
Really?
that was solely because of a numbers thing. That's
Yeah,
because there were like
exactly.
12 dudes all behind cover and all just like blind firing at me with
Yeah.
assault rifles.
Right,
So
and you
there was
can't get
literally
to them.
right.
So
It
that's
was
the
just a
only-
storm of bullets that I couldn't stand up to accurately aim in.
Sure. That's when the thermite rifle would have been awesome.
Very true, but there was no option to
Missed
have
opportunity.
it there. But
Yeah.
that's the thing, though, is like
Yeah.
you can have the thermite rifle in like 2 or 3 missions.
Sure.
And that's it. Like there's no, kind of like we were talking about with forcing you to look but don't touch.
Yeah.
You really, until the very last boss fight, you don't have control over your own arsenal. Like you never
Well,
get a point
yeah.
where you can say, all right, I want to take the arc rifle and then I want the revolver, or I'm going to take grenades and a thermite rifle.
Right.
Like you don't get that option, and that
take
was
what
like,
they give you. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like sometimes, like most of the time, they were very, situation appropriate. But there were times when I was like, oh, I really could use that thermite rifle right now.
Right.
I remember there's this one battle on a bridge, and I was just the angriest person because I just got a ton of terrible weapons. Like so
Yeah.
many pistols that are like, this is useless. There are like 20 guys coming at me.
Yep.
I do not want this.
Sure.
Though that rocket launcher, though, I want to see that
Okay, that was-
again.
that
rocket-
was nice.
It
That
was a very short segment, but it was very satisfying.
Yeah, it was like the first time you get a grinder gun in Gears of War.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
Yeah.
Mowing through guys.
Like, oh,
it's
this is
impressive.
what absolute power feels like.
yeah, exactly. It's
But-
like, you guys can't have anything on me.
To that degree, though, I mean, when we're actually in the fray, in the combat,
Yep.
right? Like I felt the enemies were very generic. You had the basic goons, you had the shotgun guy, you had the sniper rifle guy, and then you had the dude in the armor, right? So I didn't feel there was much variety there. And then there were certain mechanics like the black sight, which I just never even used. Like it was a non-starter for me.
Oh, see, that's how I always dealt with armor guys.
Really?
Yeah.
That was that was pretty much the only time I ever used it. But anytime one of those dudes with those stupid night helmets
Yeah.
showed up,
Yeah.
it was immediately
Honestly,
just
yeah.
L1, pop, 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 pop. Are you dead yet? No. Okay, shotgun.
Yeah, but see, to me, that's there's no variety other than just empty your clip into it. Like it doesn't.
Yeah, well,
it
that's-
doesn't feel good. Like
Yeah, black site is just boring. Like it looks
Yeah.
kind of cool. Everything slows down, black and white.
Kind of though.
Like a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's
and
weird.
then-
The targeting on it's kind of goofed too.
Yeah, it feels
Sure.
weird. And then once you're once you've killed someone, it doesn't automatically move to the next target. It's just like
Right.
you're just shooting bullets instead.
Maybe
guy.
you really hate that guy.
Yeah,
guess
seriously.
so.
Like he like stole a bar, like a drink from you at a bar like years ago, and you're
Right.
like, I remember you. I'm gonna shoot you
also-
19
You're just like,
times.
I got you to cross off my list.
Exactly.
It also kind of feels like a waste of time. Like, I guess it's good to get out of a situation if there's a lot of people closing in on you. It felt like a waste of ammo to me too, because you have
Yeah.
to pop like 3 bullets into one guy. It's like I could have just gotten headshots.
So
Yeah.
I was right there with you. Like I felt like the use of the feature actually was a detriment to me, rather than just like I can hide behind cover,
Yep.
line up the camera where I'm pretty sure your head is going to be, pop
Exactly.
out, kill you, and get back in.
Well, that
It-
was the other thing too. Is combat was made a million times more difficult than it had to be, solely because of the permanent letterbox.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I thought.
So I mentioned this specifically in the review.
Yeah. It was. I mean, it's a cool notion that it's like we're gonna keep the whole thing one long cutscene, but at the same time, I just paid $400 or $500 for an HD TV that you're just wasting 2/3 of, like, and it also it doesn't let me.
That's a good way to think about it.
It will, it's
Yeah.
I paid you $60 for the game, like, and you gave me say $25 worth of screen space. But it also it totally screws up the experience too, because
Yeah.
I know you mentioned this in your review. If you're ducked behind a certain piece of cover and there's like guys below you, you tilt the camera down and all you
And-
see is the bricks over your
Yeah,
head.
you have literally a half inch between
Yeah.
the top of the bottom of the top bezel and the top of whatever you're trying to hide
Right.
behind. And that's not. I feel like I was trying to fight through a mail slot. Like
Yeah.
I was literally just.
Yeah, I mean, the
looking.
blind fire mechanic, I felt that kind of helped in like an aesthetic perspective where,
Yeah.
if I'm in real life gonna blind fire a gun over a counter, like I don't
Right.
really know what's over there.
Sure. Okay.
But at the same time, like it's a video game. Let me try and save some of my ammo.
I think we can agree that unless you had like one of the big mega guns, it was just kind of boring.
The combat
Yeah.
is just
I
generic.
mean, really, the
Stale.
only one that I found successfully working with the blind fire, at least, was the arc cannon, because that just auto targets
Oh yeah,
whoever's
I mean
in
that's
the way.
you hold the button and then kind of aim in the direction that you want
Yeah.
something to die.
But when
and
they're
it
like,
happens.
when their whole side of their body explodes, and
Oh,
they're like,
man.
what? It's
Yeah.
super satisfying.
our video editor who cut the video found a great clip of me using the arc cannon on a guy, and just like
yeah.
the whole top fourth of his torso is gone. It's gone. But cool weapons, kind of generic combat.
Yeah.
I felt like
I wasn't-
I'm not going to remember the Order's combat in a year.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll remember the guns, but I'm not
Sure.
gonna, nothing about the actual mechanics of combat itself really blew my skirt.
Yeah, and that's sort of an analogy for the game itself, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are some very cool high points, but most of it is just fighting itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's what we think of the Order, 1886. For more on the Order, much more, stick with IGN.